Hi, all. How's everybody doing? Welcome back to the Divine Frequency. I'm Jay, your vibe coach. Thank you for showing up. If you're new here, welcome. I hope you stick around. We have a lot of cool stuff to talk about. So today we're talking about something that doesn't get discussed enough in spiritual spaces: spiritual suffering. We talk about raising our vibration. We talk about manifesting. We talk about alignment. We talk about signs, synchronicities, intuition, abundance, and trusting the universe. But what happens when you don't feel any of that? What happens when you're praying, meditating, journaling, trying to stay positive, and you're still hurting? What happens when your spirit feels tired? Sometimes spirituality doesn't feel peaceful. Sometimes the spiritual journey can feel incredibly lonely. And if you've ever been there, I want you to know something. You aren't failing at spirituality because you're struggling. One of the biggest misconceptions about spiritual growth is that once you become spiritually aware, you're supposed to stop experiencing difficult emotions. That's not reality. Being spiritually connected doesn't mean you never experience grief. It doesn't mean you never feel angry. It doesn't mean you won't experience heartbreak, disappointment, loneliness, fear, or confusion. And it certainly doesn't mean you have to pretend everything is happening for your highest good while you're actively hurting. You can be grateful and still be exhausted. You can have faith and still have questions. You can trust the divine and still say, I don't understand why this is happening. Those things can exist at the same time. Have you ever gone through a season where you felt like you were asking for guidance and heard nothing? You asked for a sign, nothing. You pray for clarity, nothing. You try to follow your intuition, still confused. And eventually you start wondering, did I lose my connection? Am I being ignored? Did I do something wrong? Why does everyone else seem to be receiving answers except me? But silence doesn't automatically mean abandonment. Sometimes we expect spiritual guidance to arrive loudly: a sign, a dream, a synchronicity, a sudden realization. But sometimes guidance is quieter. Sometimes it's the feeling that says, don't go back. Sometimes it's the exhaustion you feel every time you return to the same situation. Sometimes it's the peace that arrives when you finally stop forcing something. Sometimes the answer isn't a message. Sometimes the answer is what you're finally willing to release. There are seasons of spiritual transformation where the things you once believed no longer feel sufficient. The identity you built your life around starts changing. Relationships change. Priorities change. Your understanding of yourself changes, and suddenly you don't know who you are anymore. That can feel terrifying. You may think you're losing yourself, but sometimes you're actually losing the version of yourself that was built around survival. And that's not always a beautiful process. Transformation can be messy. It can be uncomfortable. It can feel like grief. Because even when you're becoming someone new, you may still miss who you used to be. I want to say this because I think it's important. You don't have to spiritualize every painful experience. You don't have to immediately find the lesson. You don't have to call every betrayal a blessing. You don't have to pretend you're grateful for something that broke your heart. And you don't have to rush yourself into positivity. Sometimes healing begins simply by saying, this hurts. That's enough. Feel the grief. Feel the anger. Cry. Rest. Be quiet. Ask for help. Take a break. You don't lower your vibration by acknowledging that you're hurting. You're being honest. And honesty is part of healing. Sometimes spiritual suffering forces us to confront the places where we've abandoned ourselves. Maybe you kept giving because you wanted to be chosen. Maybe you stayed because you were afraid of starting over. Maybe you kept looking for signs because you already knew the answer but didn't want to accept it. Maybe you kept asking the divine to change someone else when the lesson was about changing what you were willing to accept. And that's a painful realization. But it can also be liberating. Because eventually you realize, I can't control everything that happens to me, but I can decide how I will show up for myself. You are allowed to ask why. There's nothing wrong with asking why. Why did this happen? Why did they leave? Why did I have to experience this? Why didn't things work out? Why did I have to lose something I loved? You don't have to suppress those questions to prove that you have faith. Sometimes questioning is part of your relationship with the divine. Faith isn't always having answers. Sometimes faith is saying, I don't understand this, but I'm still here. That's strength. If you're in a season where you don't feel connected, don't force yourself to perform spirituality. You don't have to wake up every morning pretending you're overflowing with gratitude. Start smaller. Drink some water. Take a walk. Put your feet on the ground. Take a deep breath. Write down what you're feeling. Sit in silence. Talk to somebody you trust. I'm always available. You can find me on my website. Link is there. But talk to someone you trust. Pray if prayer feels right, and rest if rest is what you need. Sometimes connecting with your spirit doesn't look mystical. Sometimes it looks like taking care of your human self. Because you are both. You are spiritual and you are human. And your humanity deserves compassion too. And this is important. Spirituality should never become a reason to avoid getting support. If you're deeply struggling, reach out to a therapist, counselor, trusted person, or other qualified professional. Doesn't mean that you lack faith. Sometimes the support you need can come through another human being. You don't have to carry everything alone. Whatever you're experiencing right now, please don't make the mistake of believing this is who I am now. It's what you're experiencing. It isn't all that you are. This chapter is not the entire book. This feeling is not your entire future. You may not know when things will change. You may not know what comes next, but you don't have to know the entire path. Sometimes you just have to take the next step, and then the next one, and then the next. So if your spirit feels tired right now, I want you to stop judging yourself for it. You don't have to be the strongest person in the room, and you don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to understand the lesson yet. You don't have to pretend you're okay. Give yourself permission to be human. Give yourself permission to grieve. Give yourself permission to question. Give yourself permission to rest, and most importantly, don't confuse a difficult season with a disconnected life. You can feel lost and still be guided, and you can feel tired and still be growing. You can feel uncertain and still be moving forward, and you can experience darkness without believing that the light is gone forever. Because your spiritual journey isn't asking you to become someone who never suffers. Maybe it's teaching you how to stay connected to yourself while you move through the suffering. So take a break. Take a breath. You're still here, and sometimes being still here is the beginning of everything changing. This is the divine frequency. You don't have to be spiritually perfect to be spiritually connected. Until next time, protect your energy, honor your humanity, take care of yourself, and take care of each other.